Okay, settle in. Let me tell you about something that happened. It's kind of a long story, but it's a big part of why things are the way they are with my family. You know how sometimes the people who are supposed to have your back the most are the ones who let you down? Yeah, well, I grew up in this small town, Oakhaven, just a quiet place. We lived in a modest little 2-story house. My parents were. Well, they were my parents. My dad ran a little cafe, The Daily Grind, which kept us afloat, and my mum mostly stayed home, sometimes helping him out. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable enough. For most of us, anyway. See, I have an older sister, Chloe. She's just 2 years older than me. But growing up, it honestly felt like we were living on different planets. From the get-go, Chloe was the favourite, the star. Chloe, darling, that piano recital was just exquisite. Mum would swoon, or Dad, puffing out his chest at family dinners. Did you hear about Chloe's debate team? State champions. And me? I was just me. I did well in school too, got good grades, was involved in things like the science club and was treasurer for the student council for a bit. But my achievements were usually met with a polite nod, maybe. That's nice, dear. There was never that same sparkle in their eyes, that burst of pride. It was the little things too. Chloe got the newest phone when it came out. I got her old one when she upgraded, usually with a cracked screen already. She wore trendy clothes. I wore her hand-me-downs. Every holiday, every birthday, it felt like a performance centered around Chloe and how amazing she was. I learned pretty quickly to just fade into the background, nod and smile, and try not to take it personally. But it still stung, you know. It always did. I remember Mum telling me once, completely out of the blue, "Maya, maybe you should think about going to technical school or finding a good trade. There's nothing wrong with working with your hands or customer service. Honest work." It wasn't said meanly exactly, but it felt like a door closing, like she was gently but firmly telling me not to aim too high. It was like they saw me a certain way, practical, maybe a little slow on the uptake compared to brilliant Chloe, and they just accepted it. And they weren't just accepting it. It felt like they were trying to steer me into that box. Looking back, all that stuff, all the comparisons, the subtle little digs, the feeling that I wasn't quite as good, it really built up. It left marks. But sometimes those kinds of hurts are what make you strong. What they didn't realise was that their lack of faith in me was actually fueling this quiet fire inside. Then came the college thing. When Chloe got her acceptance letter to the state university, the whole house celebrated for a week. Mum framed the letter. Dad opened a special bottle of wine. They talked non-stop about her bright future, how they'd been saving for her college fund since she was born. It was a huge deal. I was genuinely happy for Chloe, but a part of me just watched, wondering if I'd ever get that kind of moment. Fast forward 2 years, it was my turn. I'd worked my tail off, gotten great grades, done everything right. I applied to a few places, mostly state schools, nothing crazy expensive, but good programs. I finally worked up the courage to talk to my parents about it. College? Mum blinked at me, then let out this short, almost disbelieving laugh. "Maya, come on, let's be realistic. We can't afford to send you to college. We used up a lot helping Chloe." My heart sank. "But what about what you saved? You said you saved." "Since she was born," Dad cut in, looking a little uncomfortable but siding with Mum. "That was different, Maya. Chloe had a clear path. She's exceptional. You, well, you're more grounded. You'd be much better off learning a skill here in town. Or maybe," he added, trying to sound helpful, "I could use some more help at the cafe. You could be a waitress." A waitress. The word hit me like a physical blow, after all that work, all that trying. "But I could work while I study," I practically begged, tears stinging my eyes. "Please, just help me with the first year or part of it. I'll get loans, I'll work full-time in the summers, I promise I'll pay you back every single penny. We could even write it down, get a lawyer, anything." "Maya," Mum said, her voice firm, shutting down any argument. "We don't borrow money, not ever. It's a principle, and we're not changing our principles for this. You need to accept your situation and find something suitable here." I ran to my room that night and just fell apart. It wasn't just the money, it was the absolute lack of belief. The clear message that I wasn't worth the investment, not like Chloe was. But then, the anger started to bubble up. The next morning, I woke up with this quiet, fierce resolve. I knew who I had to go to. Grandma. Ellen and Grandpa Joe lived just a few towns over. They were my safe harbour, the only ones who seemed to see me, not just Chloe's shadow. I drove over there, walked into their cosy kitchen and just burst into tears, telling them everything. Grandpa Joe's face got serious, his eyes, usually so kind, filled with a mix of sadness and something that looked a lot like quiet fury. "We don't have college savings, sweetheart," he said softly, holding my hand. "But let me think. We'll figure something out. No grandchild of ours is going to have their future stolen. What happened next? It still gets me. They decided to sell their old country house. It wasn't much, just a simple place with a bit of land they'd owned for decades, filled with so many memories. But it was enough. The sale of that property, their cherished home, covered 4 years of tuition at a state university across the state. I chose that school specifically because it was far away, as far as I could get from Oakhaven, and the constant reminders of my family's disbelief. The day I left for the first time, I didn't go from my parents' house. I packed up my few things, said a quiet goodbye while they were out. They didn't even know the exact date I was leaving, and my grandparents drove me to the bus station. Just the 3 of us. Grandma Ellen hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, and Grandpa Joe, he just gripped my shoulder, looking out at the buses, pretending not to wipe his eyes. That day, I didn't just leave Oakhaven. I left my parents behind. I didn't talk to them for years. When I came back for holidays, I stayed with my grandparents in the small house they moved into. Their sacrifice was everything to me. It was a constant reminder of what love and support really looked like. College was hard, I won't lie. I worked part-time, studied late, pushed myself harder than I thought possible. I was studying investment management. Funny, right? Them, telling me I wasn't college material, and I picked something that sounds about as college as it gets. Every late night in the library, every challenging class, it was fueled by this quiet determination to prove them wrong, not just to them, but to myself. When I graduated, I moved to a big city, far from Oakhaven. The job market was tough, really, tough. I sent out dozens of applications, faced a ton of rejection. It felt like I was back at square one sometimes. Eventually, I landed a job at a small, independent trading company called Stratton & Co. It wasn't exactly the high-flying investment firm I'd dreamed of, but it was a start. I found a little apartment on the edge of the city, nothing fancy, just a clean, safe place that I paid for with my own money. Life has a funny way of turning corners when you least expect it. I was plugging away at Stratton & Co. doing my best, but feeling a bit stuck when my phone rang one afternoon. It was Lisa, my old college roommate. "Maya, you are not going to believe this," she practically yelled through the phone. "Remember how we always talked about working for Blackwood Capital, the big one? They're opening a new office in your city and they're hiring analysts. I already put in a good word for you with the hiring manager." My heart just leaped into my throat. Blackwood Capital was one of the biggest names in the business, the kind of place that felt impossible for someone like me. I spent that whole night polishing my resume, writing cover letters, and the next week prepping like crazy for the interview. Walking into their temporary office felt surreal, like everything I'd been through, every struggle, every late night, study session, every ignored achievement had led to this moment. The interview was intense. They grilled me on market trends, financial models, specific investment strategies. But all those extra hours I'd put in at my small job, all the independent research I'd done just because I loved it, it paid off. A week later, I got the call. I was in. From day one at Blackwood, I just dove in. While others left at 5 p.m, I stayed late. I devoured financial reports, developed new investment strategies, refined my proposals. My first major project was managing a significant portfolio for a mid-sized tech company. And when it yielded a 40% return in the first quarter, people started noticing. "Maya, this is exceptional work," my supervisor told me during my 6-month review. Along with the praise came a bonus. It was more money than I had made in an entire year at my old job. But it wasn't just about the money, it was validation. I worked even harder, took on bigger, more challenging projects. I started building a reputation for turning around struggling investments. The bonuses kept coming, and they kept getting bigger, and I had a plan for every single dollar. 2 years after starting at Blackwood, I walked into a luxury car dealership. The salesman probably took one look at me and thought I was lost, but I pointed to their top-of-the-line SUV and said, "I'll take that one." An hour later, I was pulling up to Grandma Ellen and Grandpa Joe's small house in Oakhaven, a brand new car gleaming in their driveway, a giant red bow on top. Grandpa Joe's jaw literally dropped when I handed him the keys. Grandma Ellen just cried and hugged me. It felt so good to finally give them something significant after everything they'd done. But I wasn't done. The next month, I closed on a stunning apartment in the Heights, the newest, most prestigious development in the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, incredible views. It was everything I had worked for, a tangible symbol of my independence and success. I was walking out of my building one morning, coffee in hand, when I heard a familiar voice. "Maya, is that you?" Chloe was standing there, dressed in expensive workout clothes, looking completely shocked. "What are you doing here?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the moment sink in. "Oh," I said casually, gesturing up towards the top floors of the building. "I live here. Just bought the penthouse, actually." The look on her face. You should have seen it. Disbelief, shock, confusion. And then, slowly, something else started to creep in. For the very first time in my life, I saw genuine envy in my perfect older sister's eyes. It was a strange feeling. Not exactly satisfying, but noticeable. About a week after running into Chloe, my phone rang. It was my parents' number. I hadn't spoken to them in years, not since that dinner where they called people like me beggars. Seeing their name pop up was surprising, to say the least. Even more surprising was that they said they were in the neighbourhood and wanted to stop by. Curiosity, I guess, made me agree. When they walked into my apartment. Wow, their faces were priceless. Mum's eyes were darting everywhere, from the panoramic windows to the modern art on the walls, the expensive furniture. Dad just stood awkwardly by the door, like he was afraid to step on the rug. "Well, Maya," Mum finally managed, running a tentative finger along the edge of my marble kitchen island. "This is quite impressive. You must be doing very well for yourself." "I am," I replied simply, gesturing for them to sit on my ridiculously comfortable sofa. They exchanged nervous glances. Then Mum cleared her throat, putting on that familiar, slightly wheedling tone I remembered from childhood. Well, we actually have some news. Grace is engaged to Thomas. Chloe. Right. Congratulations, I said flatly. They announced it last month, Dad added quickly, at the engagement party. An engagement party I hadn't been invited to, of course, and they're planning the wedding for 6 months from now, Mum continued, her voice getting higher. We've offered to pay half the expenses as is. Traditional. Dad shifted uncomfortably beside her. But it seems the total budget is... well, it's quite large. How large? I asked, already sensing where this was going. $300,000, Mum said in a rush. $300,000. I nearly choked on my water. 300,000? The number sounded unreal. Thomas's family. They have certain expectations, Mum explained quickly, waving a dismissive hand. They're very prominent in the community. We announced we'd cover half before we knew the final amount. And now... She trailed off, looking at me, pointedly. Now you need $150,000, I finished for her. Exactly. Mum brightened like I was finally understanding. And since you're doing so well, Maya, living in this beautiful place, working at such a prestigious firm, you want me to just give you the money? I asked, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Loan, Dad interjected quickly, straightening up. We're asking for a loan. We'll pay you back. Of course we will. We can even get it notarized. We know it's a lot. Mum jumped back in, practically pleading. But we can't back out now. It would be so incredibly embarrassing with Thomas's family. They're expecting a certain standard. Like when I wanted to go to college, I interrupted, the words coming out before I could stop them. When I begged you for help. When I offered to sign a legal document promising to pay you back everything with interest. Mum's face flushed red. That was different. Different how? I stood up, my voice rising slightly. Different, because it was me asking. Because you told me you don't borrow money on principle. Stella, be reasonable. Reasonable? I cut him off, walking towards them now. Like you were reasonable when you told me I wasn't college material. When you offered me a waitress job instead of helping me get an education. When you stood by and let Grandma and Grandpa sell their home to help me while you saved all your sai. Money for Chloe? Is that reasonable? That's not fair, Mum protested, half standing now. No, I said, stopping in front of them, looking down. What's not fair is that you're only here right now because you need something from me. You didn't invite me to the engagement party. You haven't spoken to me in years. And now you show up in my home asking for $150,000. I walked to the door of my apartment and opened it wide. I don't loan money, I said, my voice calm and cold. On principle. I believe that's a family tradition, isn't it? Mum gasped, her face turning a furious shade of red. How dare you? Throwing our words back at us, after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Please leave now. They stormed out, Mum muttering loudly about ingratitude and how I thought I was too good for them now. Dad wouldn't even look at me as he hurried past. As I closed the door behind them, a wave of something I hadn't expected washed over me. Not triumph exactly, but peace. A huge weight lifted off my shoulders. For the very first time I had stood up to them, on my own terms, in my own home. From a place of strength they couldn't touch. My phone rang again the next day. It was Chloe. What is wrong with you? She didn't even bother with a greeting. Mum told me what happened. How can you be so selfish? I leaned back in my office chair, watching the city skyline out my window. Selfish? I repeated slowly. That's rich, coming from you, Chloe. We're family, Maya. Family helps each other. You have the money. Everyone knows you're doing well now. Why won't you help with my wedding? Her voice was rising, bordering on hysterical. I almost laughed. Family? Now suddenly I'm family? What about that dinner at your house? When you all sat there and called people who live on my street beggars? When you mocked where I lived and laughed at my job? Was I family then? That was different, she protested weakly. We were just teasing. You're being ridiculous now. No, I said, my voice flat and steady. What's ridiculous is that none of you spoke to me for years. Not one call, not one text, until you needed something. If you need money so badly, why don't you ask our parents? They're your real family, after all. They made that pretty clear for years. You bitter, ungrateful, Chloe shrieked. You think so much better than us now with your fancy apartment and your big job. You're still the same pathetic little sister who was never good enough. The line went dead. She'd hung up. I sat there for a moment, listening to the dial tone, surprised to find that her words didn't hurt anymore. They just sounded tired, like a broken record. A week or so later, I was having Sunday dinner with Grandma Ellen and Grandpa Joe. It's a tradition I've kept up religiously since college. Grandma was a little quieter than usual as she served the pot roast. Your parents called us yesterday, Grandpa Joe finally said, his voice heavy. I put down my fork. Let me guess. They asked for money, for the wedding. Grandma Ellen nodded, looking worried. They're getting desperate, I think. Your mother had quite a lot to say about family obligations when we told them we're retired and simply don't have that kind of money. Your mother had the nerve, Grandpa Joe continued, his eyes flashing a bit, to suggest we sell something. She said. Well, she said, you sold the land for Maya's college, didn't you? And then she suggested we sell. The car. My blood ran cold. The car I gave you. That's when I hung up on her, Grandpa Joe said, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. Told her that unlike some people, we don't sell gifts from family members who actually care about us. Grandma Ellen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The three of us sat there for a moment in understanding silence, bound together by something far stronger and truer than just blood. Word travels fast in a small town like Oakhaven. And my parents, desperate to save face, made sure their version of events spread like wildfire through the extended family and their social circle. I started hearing snippets of their carefully crafted narrative from distant cousins and family, friends I barely knew. Did you hear about Maya? I overheard my mother's friend loudly gossiping in the grocery store aisle, not realising I was right there. Got some fancy job in the city, and now she thinks she's too good for her own family. Won't even speak to them. Says they're too poor for her now. At church, relatives would give me disapproving looks when I visited with my grandparents. My Aunt Martha called one evening, her voice thick with judgment. Your mother told me you wouldn't even let her into your apartment when she came to visit. How could you treat your own mother that way, Maya? I could have fought back. I could have told everyone the truth, how they only contacted me when they needed money, how they'd never supported my dreams, how they'd mocked and belittled me for years. But I'd learned long ago that trying to reason with or defend yourself against people determined to twist the truth is usually pointless. It just gives them more ammunition. So, I didn't. I focused on my work, spent time with the people who loved me, and let the gossip blow around Oakhaven like dry leaves. My grandparents knew the truth. They'd lived through it with me, and that was enough. With only a couple of weeks left before the wedding, Chloe made one final, desperate attempt. She showed up at my apartment unannounced. She was wearing a beautiful, expensive dress and had clearly put a lot of effort into looking. Well, perfect. Maya, she said, brushing past me into the living room as if she owned the place. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. We're sisters. We shouldn't be fighting like this. I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her settle herself onto my sofa. Why are you really here, Chloe? I asked quietly. To make peace? She gave me her best, brightest, most artificial smile. And to help you understand the situation better. You see, Liam's parents aren't just rich. They're old money. They have connections everywhere. This wedding, it has to be perfect. I waited, knowing this wasn't about sisterhood. The final payments are due next week, she continued, her voice losing some of its forced composure. The venue deposit, the wedding planner fee, the flowers. She started twisting the huge diamond ring on her finger nervously. If Mom and Dad can't contribute their share, it's going to be so embarrassing. Liam's parents will find out they couldn't afford it. It won't just reflect badly on Mom and Dad. It'll reflect on me, on my future with Liam. So, I said, walking slowly towards the door. This visit isn't really about reconciling. It's about the money. Well, yes, but... She stood up quickly, coming towards me, reaching out to place her hand on my arm. Maya, please, you're my sister. I need your help. We have to make a great impression on Liam's parents. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I walked the rest of the way to the door and opened it. I don't care about impressing Liam's parents, Chloe. I don't care about your perfect wedding. And I definitely don't care what any of you think anymore. Her face crumpled, her voice trembling with anger and something that sounded suspiciously like fear. You're making a huge mistake, Maya. You'll regret this. I smiled, and for the first time, it felt completely genuine, completely peaceful. No, Chloe, I said softly. For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely certain I won't. A few days after Chloe's visit, my phone lit up with a text from Sarah, Chloe's college friend who'd always been kind to me. She thought I should know what had happened at the country club the previous evening. Your parents finally had to come clean to Liam's family, Sarah wrote. They couldn't dodge the wedding planner's calls anymore. It was apparently quite a scene. I could picture it perfectly. The elegant dining room, Liam's wealthy, impeccably dressed parents, my own parents in their slightly too new, probably bought-on-credit outfits, having to admit they couldn't come up with the money they'd promised. According to Sarah, Liam's mother had been absolutely furious. The carefully planned fairy tale wedding started to unravel. The honeymoon suite in the Maldives was cancelled. The vintage champagne order was scaled back. The elaborate floral arrangements were simplified. Liam's parents eventually agreed to cover all the expenses themselves, but the damage was done. The illusion was broken. The wedding did happen, of course, though smaller and undoubtedly less extravagant than originally planned. I wasn't invited, which was fine. Grandma Ellen and Grandpa Joe received an invitation, but they politely declined, citing a prior commitment. We spent that Saturday together instead, having a picnic in their backyard, enjoying the quiet, peaceful afternoon and not mentioning the wedding once. A week or so later, the wedding photos started appearing on social media. I scrolled through them one evening, wineglass in hand, studying the faces. There was Chloe, looking beautiful in her designer gown, though her smile seemed a little stiff in some shots. Liam looked formal, his family arranged around him like expensive, unsmiling statues. And my parents. They were easy to spot, trying so hard to look comfortable, to look like they belonged in this world of old money and country club memberships. But their smiles were strained, their poses awkward and forced. Liam's parents appeared in very few photos, and in those they did, their expressions ranged from barely concealed disdain to outright displeasure. In one particularly telling shot, Liam's mother was looking at my parents with the kind of expression you'd usually reserve for stepping in something unpleasant. Sarah sent me updates occasionally in the weeks that followed. Chloe and Liam moved into a house Liam's parents had bought them as a wedding gift. My parents rarely visited them there. Apparently they weren't quite what Liam's family had envisioned for Sunday dinners. I haven't spoken to my parents or Chloe since before the wedding. I doubt I ever will again. But sitting here now in my apartment, watching the sunset paint the city sky in shades of gold and purple, I finally feel completely at peace with that. Some bridges once burned should just stay ashes. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more deep and meaningful stories.